kind of got a sense of like the work that she does and kind of her power was when she won the Nat Nakaza Awards. And for courageous journalism, and it was just due to her like incredible courage and bravery around talking about mental health issues. And I just remember when you won that award, Qaanitah, it was really exciting. I was at SANEF at that moment, and it was just super exciting because it was somebody young and a woman and kind of putting herself out there and being very brave and also quite vulnerable simultaneously. So that was fabulous. So over to you. We would love to get your input about your journey. And I don't know if you've got a presentation. You know, but whatever, whichever way you want to do it, we're happy with.
Thank you very much, Kate. When I was sitting down to think about what I'm going to say today, I thought, death by PowerPoint. Let me actually talk and then go to questions, because sometimes we get lost in the presentations and we kind of lose focus to the real human struggle of the space that we're in. So thank you everyone, and thank you for your time. Kate has mentioned that I have had an interesting journey from what is called mainstream to what is called new emerging digital media. But there's an interesting point that was made last week at a SANEF event which brought together content creators and new media to say, actually, when it comes to audiences now, your new media, your podcast, the non-journalists who are creating journalistic products are more mainstream than mainstream media, because of that's where the audience sit. And so I've been thinking about audiences for about 2 to 3 years now to say, okay, are we reaching more audiences? Who's actually reading my work and who's actually engaging in my work? And that question was born out of an existential moment in my life where I'm like, what am I doing? It was truly and utterly a midlife crisis of like, what am I doing? Why am I doing what I'm doing? What's the point of all of this? And so when it came to the 2024 general election, I was covering it for mainstream media, writing columns. I just left News 24 at the time, literally that month. And I was writing for Al Jazeera. I was still writing columns for News 24. And yet, when I was being stopped in shops, it was about the almost silly, like not almost silly, the very silly TikTok videos on the elections that was getting people talking and people engaging. And these are people that kind of knew that I was a journalist, actually engaging with my journalism, stopping and being like, oh, I saw that video and I didn't know X, Y, Z. And oh, thank you for that. And I started thinking about where people are and whether or not we need to reach them where they are, right? So I was part of the early phase of editors who had to introduce a paywall at News 24. And I had obviously previously to that worked at Sunday Times, where it was a culture of getting people to pay for journalism, and also had the luxury of working in very well-supported, well-resourced newsrooms to tell incredible original journalism, right? So the journalism that I always was supported to tell was the expensive, go spend a week in KwaZulu-Natal to snip what's happening and then write one big piece on it, that type of journalism that was getting less and less frequent because it's too expensive to do. And because essentially you're not getting the return on investment from like sending out reporters and all of this effort, and people, you get less than 10,000 people reading this piece. So I thought about what it is about sort of the TikTok video, and I'm just using it more broadly, that it's getting people talking about my story. And it also made me think about this anger that I had, where I would spend, for example, 2 weeks trying to firm up, trying to get first-person sources, for example, on a story about a meeting at Nkandla, where there were only 6 people in a room, and one of them was your source, and you had to try to tell the story about Jacob Zuma's whatever. And then an influencer will take the piece that I wrote, that took me 2 weeks to do, took me to all sorts of difficulties in confirming, etc., 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 and then speak about it and get a million hits on that video. And I thought, damn it, this is my journalism. And then I saw that happening more and more and more, where you would do this big piece of investigative reporting, and then podcaster would kind of just chat about it and it would go viral, right? I would go to the ICJ and break down the case, but then Mac G was using my video and my reporting on his podcast that would get hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views. And it just didn't make sense to me, right? So I started thinking about amplification of journalism. And then I started thinking, in the midst of my midlife crisis, started thinking about like, why are we doing, like, why do we do journalism in the first place? And it took me closer to an answer that says journalism has no value if it does not reach people, because the whole point of journalism is the end. It's not the journalism in itself. It doesn't exist for itself. It exists for the end user and empowering the end user. So whether you say I do journalism to hold power account or to inform people or to educate people, whatever it may be, at the end of the day, journalism has to reach audiences. Now, if our audiences are telling us that I don't want to engage in your journalism in boring 2,000 word pieces, I don't want to. I'm sorry. You can send me a piece every single Friday. I will not read it, right? I have to start rethinking to say, okay, then then is it the way that I'm telling the story? Is it the content? Is it the angle? Is it the format? What is it that I'm going wrong? And that's when my experimentation began to say, can a world exist where serious journalism, real journalism, can be presented in a way that people want their content to be presented, right? And it's not about, I started off in a kind of like young people, like trying to get younger audiences. That was my initial orientation, right? To say, how are we going to get young people to engage with journalism? And because I was flabbergasted by my younger brother, who lived with me for most of his life. He's 25 years old now. Had no idea 2 years ago who Raymond Zondo was. He was 23-year-old at the time. He lived in a house with someone who covered the Zondo Commission every day for months and years, right? And it's just a sense of news avoidance that an entire generation has. So then I realized that actually it's not only a young person problem, that it's a society problem, it's a worldwide problem, that the more noise there is, the less people are willing to engage in the news. And I thought about Joburg long and hard, because for months I was writing these columns about the decline of Joburg, and this was not now, this was about 2-3 years ago. And I'm like, why are people not caring more about the fact that Joburg is been sort of left for the wolves, right? And I realized that there is a direct correlation in the lack of specific reporting in Johannesburg. No one has money to send people to council. The Star newsroom that only focused on the Joburg city and the Joburg council was bigger than entire national newsrooms these days, back in the day, right? And so there is a correlation between the decline in real journalism and the a governance and accountability. So essentially, people would then only engage with information when we are ranting about Dada Morero. But then I found that, okay, there were news influencers that within, or influencers who use news as their source of content, let's phrase it that way, were within taking news articles and explaining to the public why they didn't have water in a way that a journalist who spent many months focusing on Rand Water and the woes of Rand Water and got a top secret report, could not do. And that's what actually pivoted me to this new space. Now, let me sort of sketch out where we are in the world in terms of media. Number one, there is no such thing as a print, a broadcast, a radio journalist anymore. It doesn't exist. You cannot have a single set of skills anymore. You cannot only write, you cannot only report for radio, you cannot only do lives, you cannot only script for television. That does not exist anymore, right? Number two, people are not loyal to the brands of news as they were before. Some people, especially the younger generation, so this is anyone under the age of 40, is not precious about where they get the information from, right? So yes, it may be true that people get information on social media and then go to traditional media to verify. But there is no brand loyalty in the way that they used to be, to say like it was like this premium thing that like I used to read the Business Day and think it was very cool. That element of brand attachment is not there. Thirdly, people connect more to people than they connect to news brands, right? Which puts you into a world where Christian Amanpour, one of the most famous journalists on earth, right, at the moment, has a show on one of the biggest network television in the world, right? The Amanpour Show. Probably it cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to produce her flagship show. Understands that the future is her sitting in her study on Zoom with her ex-husband, talking world issues on a podcast. That has more value than a well-coordinated show that's on CNN. So if audiences are declining for print, for television, for why are we insisting in forcing medicine down people's throat? And my answer was because people don't know that they need that medicine, right? So the example that I gave is a child needs to eat broccoli, and a child needs to eat a broccoli, and they refuse to eat this broccoli. They just would not eat it, right? So as the parent, what you do is you could either say, okay, fine, the child not eating broccoli, let me just keep giving them let's just keep giving them the broccoli and they keep not eating it. Or I could just do the extreme opposite, we just give them fried chips because that's all they're going to eat anyways. Or I can be innovative and say, I'm going to make pancakes out of the broccoli, if that's possible. I don't cook. I don't know if that's possible, right? So the understanding for me is that what is it going to kill me if I just take the broccoli and put it present it in a form to the child that they would actually eat it, but still keep the integrity of the broccoli? Because the alternative is they're eating chips for breakfast, lunch, and supper. They can't eat chips for breakfast, lunch, and supper. It's not good for their health. If you could just react if my metaphor is making sense, if you guys are with me, right? So now, in terms of where we
I'm
are,
with you, Qaanitah. I love the broccoli
cool,
thing.
cool. So it kind of brings us back to where we are now. So you have influencers, content creators with audiences. You have traditional journalists doing the hard traditional work, right, with no audiences. And so news influencers are taking the hard journalism that we do and amplifying it and then making money out of it. So Reuters comes in, and Reuters has the most definitive research of where we are in terms of a digital news survey and their digital news survey. If that report every year for me is a very accurate sense of globally where we are, right? There's a few interesting things. One is trends that the Reuters report used to pick up annually the acceleration from the time a trend is picked up to the time that it's full-blown culture and modus operandi. It's getting faster and faster, and technology is enabling that. So whereas, people are interested in blah, 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 blah before, it's from the time something comes to the table to the time that it's embedded in practice, it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So that's number one. Number two is it's definitive. The Reuters report says people want to see visuals, people don't want to read. It's not me saying this, it's definitive research, right? Three is that people connect with people. So I am more likely to trust Homotso Modise, then I am likely to read an anonymous wire copy piece on Times Live, right? I know Homotso will tell me exactly what I need to know on TikTok in the way that we did, right? Then comes the counterintuitive thing to say, if we trying to get people to pay and value journalism, why are we then doing what we did in the early 2010s with Twitter and Facebook by just giving away our journalism on TikTok and on Instagram? Like, if that's what you're preaching to say, oh, why don't you just be a news influencer? Who's going to actually pay for the journalism? And that's when I started saying, right, here's what I'm solving for. I'm solving for the new way of people wanting to consume media. I'm solving for audiences, and I'm solving for basically upskilling myself to the point of being able to tell stories in a way that people want to absorb it. And it was a humbling journey because, again, I'm a serious journalist in my mind. 15 years I've been, I'm so serious and this is who I am and blah, 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 blah. And here I am, have to download CapCut, and I must shoot on my phone and then learn how to edit like a child. And I'm not even that old, but still not understanding the language of content creation, but trying to understand to say, okay, let me see if I can tell the exact same story or the column that I wrote for News 24. If I tell it on social media, how would I do that? And that's when, for the last year, literally, it's been exactly a year from the beginning of October, that I started what is called a news creator program, where I use myself as an example to say, okay, if we say traditional journalism in the medium of content creation, if we merge these two worlds, what does that look like? And that's when the concept of what if we create a news creator? So I started with myself, hit and miss, hit and miss, hit and miss. Literally, when I would travel somewhere, I would just document it to just try to get into it. And then to the point where I am now, where I am training people who are not journalists at all to in news creation, which is harder because you have to teach people journalism first, and then you have to teach them the new medium, which is content creation. I've worked with people who know content creation, and you're teaching them journalism, which is a fun journey. But I think the best thing for me is the new cohort of people that are part of the Debrief Network, as people like Monique Lewis, people like Anati, young people who social media is very much part of their DNA, and they've been trained in journalism. So to come together to talk about formats, etc., etc., etc. Now, as the Debrief Network became essentially what is my R&D, my research and development in trends, in hooks, in formats, in understanding what works and what doesn't work. What are the skills a news creator needs? Everyone and their grandfather needs to know how to use CapCut because it's the cheapest, lowest barrier to entry editing tool, right? Everyone and their grandfather needs to know Canva. What can Canva offer me for journalism, right? Okay, those are the tools that I need. Okay, what AI solutions exist, right? And then remember, every time I'm entering these new terrains, I'm entering it with my old school traditional journalism things. So stuff like attribution, stuff like plagiarism. If I am essentially stealing visuals from the SABC, because I'm a content creator, quote unquote, I was not at the OR Tambo International Airport yesterday when the activists arrived. So I'm using other people's videos. What does that look like? And so the more you do it, the more you realize the layers that you need to solve for, right? And essentially now I am close to what is essentially, um, first of all, I know what a news creator is because now I am a news creator and I've trained news creators. And essentially, I have enough of a program to go to newsrooms, as I have been doing with Sunday Times, with the Business Day, etc., to explain the case for it. Number one, to explain the case for digital transformation is not putting print products on a website like we did from the 2010s up until now, and understanding why are people not engaging with our content. Similarly, newsrooms are spending so much of money trying to take radio shows and put them on podcasts, and no one's listening to it. And you're like, but there's a reason why people are not listening to radio. Digital cannot be this platform where you just take whatever sits in another platform, because the people that are your audiences do not know print, do not know. They're literally questioning you when you're writing a 4,000 word article. It's like, in an unprecedented turn of event, like that's not how people engage anymore, unfortunately or fortunately. And so you're trying to force a system or a way of doing things on people who have no engagement or don't, it's not natural to them. So when I have a reporter who has been trained at Rhodes, comes to me and says and does a video recording of a event at TikTok, right? So the event is very simple. I'm just using one example, then I'll stop for questions and then move forward to the next part of my presentation. Is I send it to an event at TikTok. What is TikTok doing? TikTok is talking about um, how to solve the problem of the problem of online trolling and hate for journalists, right? So it's a niche story, it's a cute story, it's an easy one, right? You go to essentially a training program for TikTok, etc. Now, old school journalists, you'd send this would be your typical kind of low entry junior journalist would be sent to this kind of low entry story. So Anati goes to the story, right? But she's trained in that kind of like presenting. News producers have that's not how people consume media. So I say to her this morning, I say, what if we did a content creator format? Come with me. That's if you know social media, you know that format is extremely popular. Spend the day with me as I da 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 da. So let me give you another example. Journalists, content creators rather, do get ready with me while I tell you about XYZ. So what I did with all of these kind of viral formats, I try to unpick them and say, okay, what is it about get ready with me as I did it that people are sharing it? You stopping to watch someone put makeup on and then talk about how they were scammed, right? It's like essentially there's a visual interest and it's first person. Somebody like it's like your friend telling you a compelling story. So okay, Q, what happens if I take that format to news, right? And then I realized that that's a gold format for a journalist, someone serious like a Kyle Cohen, who's like um, who will then can speak to you about, or Jeff Wicks, for example, people who've done complicated stories to say, let me tell you how I got the story. Does that make sense? And so this is where in the news creative program to understand that while we don't want to make the mistake of giving away journalism on social media platforms like we did with X and got nothing in return. We basically cannibalized our own audiences for 10 years. But what if we learn from the platforms and use it as an indicator to guide our journalism, right? To guide our formats, to guide and to understand that if people want visual stories, and people want visual stories, and people want bite-sized information, how can I use this on my own platforms, right? And the New York Times has done it effectively because embedded in their UX on their website is vertical video. And it's very, very visuals, that long, quote unquote, boring text stories, right? And then the second part of it, right? So it's using social video to enhance journalism. So on your own platforms, the using the lessons that you learn on these platforms in terms of how you present complex or stories or any story in general. But the second part of it is to say, okay, what if I use these social media platforms as another business? If I was a tea business, would use it for amplification, for advertising my journalism, right? Because essentially the world that we live in now, even if you're a plumber, you have to learn how to be a content creator, because that is where people engage, and that's where people that's where you find your audiences, right? More so, there's an interesting piece of content is that people are using TikTok as a search engine more than they're using Google. And that's why Google now is spending a lot of time on their Google Discover page, function, which will eventually actually spit out vertical video as search results, because people want quick bite size, like restaurants in Rosebank. I'm not going to go to like an article that I used to would be a blog coming up, or an article in News 24 Lifestyle coming up to tell me these. Firstly, generative AI is already stripping your websites, right? So I have no incentive at all as a user to go to www.ewn.co.za when, if I say Mkwanazi crime intelligence, generative AI strips everyone's and gives me the latest anyways. And it's enough to like get by in the day, right? So the question is, what value add that I can do if AI is giving people information anyways, and we can talk about the we can talk about the politics of that, but I'm talking about like the reality now. AI is already doing that. In WhatsApp, I can already get an answer to something, so I don't actually need to go to your news website to get it. What is the value add? And then the second thing that a big part of my training when I go into the newsrooms is this: if before I used to leave the office at 8 o'clock, go to Litulia House at 9, set up my physical recorder, record the ANC Secretary General, take the recorder back and write out notes, take the recorder back, take the USB, put it in my computer, download the sound, then sit for 2 hours and transcribe the press conference, then write my article, then send it for subbing, send it for news editing, send it for subbing, and then so a 9 o'clock story gets published at 3 o'clock because of that process. Whereas now I can literally record and have real time, almost accurate transcription. One, two, if I wanted to, I can even throw that transcription into any AI tool, or even as basically ChatGPT, and can spit out the most important quotes for me. So if AI can do 60% of what I was trained to do, what value am I giving as a journalist that only Qaanitah Hunter can do? And so yes, we can sit and say, oh, AI could never replace a journalist, but in some ways it's already replacing some of the functions of journalism. I don't have to sit for an hour to clean up my piece, because Grammarly, that already has the News 24 style guide, is doing it for me instantly, right? And so then what value do I have? So if I don't upskill, in 2 years' time, when people are not clicking on my articles, and when an AI is empowered enough to anyway just take a press release and turn it into a story, then okay, we're going to bemoan and cry about the fact that newsrooms are shrinking, and literally it's happening in real time. So my bad thing is to say, create the value add that only you can do, which is you can connect with people. People connect to people. And if you can do that, what are the things that you need to upskill in? For me, I had to learn how to edit myself. I learned how to shoot myself. Um, and then I find myself in Syria, right, with a DJI camera, which is amazing. It's sitting across here. I don't have it. I will, when we do another session, I'll show you all of the tools that I've been experimenting with. But kind of selfie style, telling a story about the fall of the Assad regime, right? And so it's not the future that a journalist has to do everything from ideation right until publishing. It is currently happening, right? What now? The question is, how do we empower journalists? Because yesterday when I was at the Sunday Arena newsroom training journalists, I was saying to them, I said, okay, so you would before you would have like this big multimedia team that's like has to like you have to, for example, like get graphics. You as a journalist can literally open Canva and create the graphic that you need anyways, right? So now what happens to that person who used to be doing graphics? Or how do you upskill that person to get better results? And so that is what I'm essentially solving for. I'm going to pause here, take questions, and then we can move on to the actual debrief network systems.
Great. So I just wanted to check, are there any questions for Qaanitah now? So Qaanitah, I'm finding it just fascinating. Oh, first of all, go ahead, Mahmoud. Yeah.
Thanks, Kate, and shukran to you, Qaanitah. Assalamu alaikum. So there's a lot that you've given us, and I think there's a lot of questions. But I think the key question I have is probably one that you're still going to deal with because you're moving on to debrief network next, isn't it? And although I get the point that you're making is that there's been a major shift and a major disruption with the traditional media in the mainstream space, but also in the space where AIP operates and all of our members. The big question that faces all of us is that even if we undertake that shift, from print to digital or a hybrid of print and digital, there must be a silver bullet for monetizing your content. And the shift that we're always talking about is how do you move from print to digital to create your content for your audiences and still do it professionally. But ultimately, there is no silver bullet for how do you become sustainable and monetize your content. So unless you're not answering that in your next session, perhaps I think you should answer it now. That's my question.
Yeah, I'll go to a more specific answer later, but just to say that that's essentially what is plaguing me and keeping me up at night at the moment. But the problem is this, right? If we keep doing what we've been doing, we are going to limp from one section 189 to the next. So we've been doing that. People have been stubbornly saying, no, print is the only way we can actually make money. We're going to have to. I'm saying to you, if Unilever is saying 60% of our ad spend is going to content creators, there is money for advertising in a digital space if we're able to leverage audiences. Now, the question is this. Do we say, no, if we don't have the monopoly, we're not going to play for and build audiences, or do we build the audiences anyways, and then simultaneously, try to fix the plane mid-air? So that's the question. Do you wait for the perfect moment that we've figured out how to fund journalism and then we go and invest in it? Or do we build the audiences to do the pivoting that's necessary, and then at the same time trying to solve for sustainability? Now, the thing is this, right? New York Times is a good example, right? It's traditional that transition for, right? And everyone's like, oh, we don't have the resources that the New York Times does. Even if you take one of their modus operandi, which is their journalists using their journalists using social video to advertise their good journalism, in quote unquote, not in a this way. If you just start there to say, okay, we are going to be on social media platforms only as an amplification tool, only to amplify our journalism. And how do we do that? Now you have a situation where the Sunday Times, for example, you have a reporter from the Sunday Times putting up the paper and say, buy the paper. Again, that's silly because there's too much of homework you are giving the person. You must click on my video, you must watch my video, then you must go to the shop, then you understand? So the idea is this: while you are building your sustainability model. So whether it's to say you're having a subscription or whatever it may be, how are you going to use the existing tools the audiences are to leverage those audiences to direct them to your journalism? Because essentially you're saying, if that's not I'm not saying you saying, I'm saying hypothetically what we are saying, if it's not perfect and if it's not giving me a guaranteed outcome, then I'm not playing in it. And then if you're not playing in it, you have to accept the fact that you are going to be a late adopter. And if you're going to be a late adopter, that comes with its own consequences.
Thank you. Asanda, please go ahead. And then Valent. Asanda?
Oh, okay. I wanted to highlight something that, okay, greetings everyone. I'm so sorry for not doing that. I wanted to highlight that there is a challenge in this digital journalism, because what you do, you sit down and you investigate a story and then you write a story. When it's time for you to post a story, people, they've already been breaking news. And then what is happening? No one read your story, even though it has full details and the truth in it. And that's a challenge that we've been facing. People would even take our stories and then go post our stories as if they've investigated the stories, they've written the stories. Also, some publication, they even take our stories and make the stories as if it's theirs without investigating. So now it's more like we are writing stories bad for our people to benefit. Remember that Meta is paying us, is supposedly paying, because it's paying me on my personal space. So it's paying people for this content that they're using, that they didn't work for it. So how can we help ourselves that we own our actual stories, the thing that we wrote? Like we've seen other publications writing our stories as they are, and without crediting us, even on their newspapers, without crediting us. And it's like, okay, I have journalists to write, but those journalists, they're not really working for me because I'm not benefiting on the content that they put online. Okay, I don't have a problem maybe on other platforms, but then putting online, because I do know that on my personal Facebook account, I'm making money by posting whatever I post, whether it's a content, whether it's a picture, whether it's a video. Although on my other accounts, like our publication accounts, I'm not yet there, but then I'm hoping to get there. Now the issue is, whenever now I post a full detailed story, someone already break the news, and then the news maybe is not even in full detail, and some of them, they're not even what exactly happened, and people, they're no longer interested on the truth and no one's gonna be sharing it.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Asanda. Yeah.
So that's a problem everyone has. Jeff Wick spent 2 years of his life only on Tembisa Hospital. And people literally rip off the information as if it's like so easily available. Like that one singular fact that Hangwani Maumela is Ramaphosa's nephew through marriage is like you don't understand the time and energy and sleuthing that it took to get that piece of information. Now, there's multiple ways. We can sit here and agonize and say, oh, people steal content, and we can just like, become alcoholics because there's good reason to do that, right? Or we can say, okay, what is it that people that I can do to, one, own my journalism, right? So there's simple things like, for example, a level of trust, building, so constantly working on the trust. So when a piece of journalism is released, to work on explaining to the public how that's like a secondary piece, for example. Having SOPs in order in terms of like, okay, our images have watermarks. I'm just using very similar stupid examples of like of just ownership of the journalism. And then the third thing is that you have to build that person. You almost have to like lose some to win some, right? So yes, people will steal your journalism, but what is to figure out what is making people listen to Dan Corder talking about my story instead of listening to me talking about my story. And so maybe it's a simple thing. Dan Corder talks in a more accessible language. What if I try that out? So just like how Dan Corder is stealing my journalism, what if I steal I'm just using an example here, his style of communication and delivery? Does that make sense to you? And so what I say is that this agony that you're having is only going to get worse now that you have generative AI stripping our work anyways. The plummeting of traffic to news websites is a bloodbath that nobody is brave enough to say. That big newsrooms, big newsrooms have a handful of stories that even reach 20,000 people. Do you know how little that is? That you get, like I literally say, like if you put a video of an AI generated twerking bear, you can have more than 200,000 views, right? And so we can fear the reality and not engage with that reality, or we can say, okay, what can we do differently? If people are engaging with short form vertical video, and that's where information is, what can I do? How can I present my information and my journalism that way? Or I can be stubborn about it and say, no. I'm going to do the what, when, who, how boring story about the rewriting a press release, and then nobody actually engage with it. But I'm so married to the way of that I've always been doing it. I don't want to adapt. It really is up to you. And so this is a very simple story, right? A simple example. There's an accident. Not an accident. There's a heist, right? The content creator doesn't have the skills to verify, to crystallize information, to get to sources, to do all of the traditional journalism. We know how to do that. Our teams know how to do that, right? But what if we just say to the police spokesperson, in addition to sending your statement, can you record yourself selfie style summarizing what happened? And then a journalist records herself giving the context, putting the video in, adding the bite from Atande, getting a first witness account shot on a phone, before she leaves that accident scene. That article that she would have come back to the office to search and write it down, it's already done, edited in CapCut. Everything is the presets are there, and then you have that piece of content. Like, think about it. You already have an advantage. You are at the scene. You understand what I'm saying? So why not leverage the advantage that you have? And those media houses that are leveraging it, for example, who have, I know with us, right? When Hasina was the head of content for Debrief, could have just literally taken the SIU briefing and summarized it. That's lazy, right? Or I told her, why don't you go with a vlog camera, the DJI, to Tembisa Hospital, right? Again, that's like in the scale of journalism. You'll send a junior reporter to say, go to the hospital to see what's happening there, right? It's not like big investigative, but I'm saying the format. She vlogged herself going to the scene of the crime. It went viral. So what I'm saying to you is, what if we become, the first part is the buy-in to say, if we keep doing things the way we have been doing things, we are writing our own obituaries, one. Two, in innovating the future, we don't have to give up and relinquish journalism. We don't need another opinion podcast. We don't need another interview style podcast. That, like, who's going to be doing the journalism if everybody's going to be doing social commentary and political commentary, right? So what if we leverage that which we already have a monopoly on, which is good traditional information, good traditional journalism for verified information, and use that as our starting point? And I tell you this, that there are no examples of media startups actually eclipsing traditional media houses. Think about Vox. Vox came onto the scene and was going to be the next big thing, because traditional journalism, the hard work, as I say to people, the debrief network should not exist, because actually I will never ever be able to have the reach that a News 24 newsroom will have. But News 24 should be doing news in the way the debrief network is presenting to the public, because they already have the credibility. They already have trained journalists. They're just not wanting to do this, the new part, which is learning how to talk to audiences in a way that we have to, and then elevating it, which is other things, which is obviously the monetization conversation. The UX conversation is, how do you build the tech so that you can kind of replicate the user experience on the social media platforms internally in your own apps. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it does not serve me, and it does not serve journalism for journalists to give away our journalism on TikTok. But in the absence, for as long as news websites still looking, performing, and acting like digital newspapers that nobody actually wants to engage in and is archaic and old school, I'm going to have to use these platforms because that's where my audiences are.
Thank you. And sorry, Qaanitah, just suddenly my screen froze and I kind of fell off whatever. But anyway, I'm back. So V, please go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
No problem. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And thanks, Q. I think, yeah, my first question was actually asked by Uncle M. And then just to follow up on what Asanda was saying, was not a follow-up, more or less piggybacking on that one. So you know how, I don't want to say the upcoming journalists, but then everyone, not everyone in general, okay. So the perception of when there are certain topics that are posted on Twitter, not Twitter, TikTok, social media pages, where a journalist literally did all the hard work, covered the story, posted it on TikTok, but then doesn't get those clicks. But then comes Violent, an influencer, not a journalist, take the story, republish it, say it in a friendly way, get more clicks. So for me, the question is more or less on that, in terms of what advice do you have for young journalists, but then not just young, but then to journalists in general, who feel pressured to chase clicks or trending topics over quality reporting? And then the follow-up to that again will be, how can journalists and editors rebuild trust in an era of misinformation and AI-generated content? Thanks.
Amazing. So it's not one or the other. So we are not, and that's what the temptation is, right? To say we are going to sacrifice quality of good journalism because we're running after click, right? I'll tell you this: do not underestimate your audience. Your audience, like, yes, overall, holistically, it sounds like a contradiction to say on a TikTok platform, the user audience doesn't reward hyper polished. They like, you in your kitchen will get more views than you in a studio, for example, right? But what I'm saying to you is that doesn't have to translate into cheap journalism, because what are the tenets of good journalism? Like, this is what I say to my team. I'm like, 2 sources. So what if okay, in the past, if I was doing a visual story, I would have gotten into my car, take a crew with me. It would cost me so much to do an interview with Patrick Bond, who was going to give me 1 minute that I can use at most. Whereas I can just tell Patrick Bond, please can you explain the gold price and send me a video on WhatsApp? Exactly, you're doing exactly journalism. You're asking an expert for an opinion, right? But you're doing it to say, he can do that. He can just open his phone, shoot himself, giving you the answer, send it to you in HD, and then you can use that in your journalism, right? So what I'm saying to you is, we also, as we pioneering, and that's the space that I'm in now, is to train the user to create the to differentiate, to say we are doing real journalism, we are news creators. That's why I'm spending a lot of time literally with the press code, and to say, okay, what is it that I can operationalize for a content creator? So for example, things like attribution, things like double sourcing, things like how do you operationalize that for a news creator, right? Because I am extremely confident that whether you are as specialized as Christian Amanpour or you are a junior straight out of campus, news creation, the skills of news creation, everyone has to have, right? And so that's why I say that, so you can be biased towards a medium to say, okay, uh, uh, um, you could be biased to the medium to say, okay, we still want to be text-based, but what if you pair reporters up? So you have one person who's working on writing the 3,000 word amazing piece, and you have another person who's translating that for your mass audiences, right? Or translating one element of that for your mass audiences. What was your second question? Your second question was around AI, right? Okay, so let me tell you, for us who are experimenting in this field, there's a lot of us who are trying. It's video is expensive, right? So I can't afford by any means paying for an AP feed. Hopefully I'm going to have a blesser that's going to sponsor it to me, but I can't pay for it, right? I also can't be the SAB. Like, let me give you an example of yesterday. Yesterday, I worked for Newsroom Africa, right? Because I freelance for them 10 days a month. It was me, it was a cameraman, it was a cameraman assist, it was another cameraman, and it was another producer that was at the airport. And there was at least 5 people in the office helping process the video. 10 people working on the arrival of the activists, right, to get those visuals. I'm a content creator. I'm just downloading Newsroom Africa, stealing their visuals. But it's 10 people, 10 salaries, it's petrol, it's cameras, it's all of these things that I just simply can't afford. So there are 2 things that I'm doing. I'm trying to say, okay, that world is an unsustainable world because nobody can afford to do that high expensive journalism. But I don't want to do the extreme opposite, which is just rip off everybody. What does the middle ground look like, right? So the middle ground looks like asking ordinary people who are there on social media to send you videos. Or it's interviewing a source on Zoom and downloading that visual and using that instead of going and recording that person, you know? Or it could mean reporters using phones instead of like big expensive cameras. So there's a way, there's a hybrid. So what I'm encouraging you to think about is that if we are in the process of this world is not serving us. If we being rigid about this world, then we are talking about our own obituary here, right? Take the Financial Mail. The Financial Mail has way too good of journalism for it to reach under 10,000 people a week. That is silly. That's the amount of amazing journalism that sits there needs to reach hundreds of thousands of people. But then you have another guy, Mufasa, whatever his name is, who uses AI to basically just go into the numbers of things, repurposes it in a language of how people understand, and can take an annual report of a company and reach hundreds of thousands of people, right? So we are long past the thing that says people are not interested in news. Maybe people are not interested in how we are presenting the news to them, right? And then it's about learning from the people. If audiences are migrating to another company, if I was macro, I need to go and figure out why are people going to Take a Lot? So that's the same humbling experience that we as media need to do, is to say, okay, what is it that they are doing? Okay, they're doing visual storytelling. I must go and learn visual storytelling. But what we're trying to do is kind of like, and newsrooms, like, I want to cry when I hear that. Say, oh, we must just hire influencers to come do content for us. And I'm like, no. You're doing the same problem we did in the past. Whereas essentially what we're failing to realize is that the skill that exists in your newsroom is not fit to reach people, the product, to take our product to the people that we want them, to our consumer, essentially.
Thanks, Qaanitah. That's excellent. I'm just aware of the time, so we've literally got 3 minutes left. I just wanted to ask people, because I really want you to have a quick input on the debrief network. So, colleagues, is it okay, and is it okay for you, Qaanitah, to spend another 10 minutes, 5 minutes, just telling us a little bit about the network, and then maybe getting one more question, and we can then end at 11:10. Is that okay? Or you don't have time?
Yeah.
And it's okay if you don't
Perfect.
have time.
No, perfect. Okay.
All right.
So the Debrief Network is a new media platform. It is a network of news creators. That's what we envision. So we have a series of news creators that will be part of this. And essentially each news creator ideates to complete one full swing, right? So currently, it's myself. I am the founder, and I do, and I'm pretty much in charge of the entire editorial process and everything that goes with it. But our platforms is social first and newsletter. That's where we're creating our community, right? Short form videos. We are going to transition into a long form show, explainer show. We only focus on three things. We focus on explainer journalism, we focus on first person storytelling, and we focus on good news. That's it, right? We don't do breaking news. Our current output is 3 to 4 stories a day. We have a head of content, which is Hasina Gori. She worked at the SABC for 15 years, and she was very much part of setting up the SABC digital team, and she heads content for us. We have Anati Ndebo, who is producer at Power FM, who has come in as a freelance news creator. Zakia, who has a master's in Africa Studies, who wants to be a new journalist, will not get a chance in a real newsroom, and she focuses more on the Africa and good news stuff. We've just appointed a full-time producer, Monique Lewis. She was someone who was trained at the SABC. So essentially, I am training them in the news creator program. We have a video editor who only works on premium stuff. So the rule from 1 October is that if you pitch a story, it must be shot by you, it must be edited by you, it must be produced by you, right? We have so far, so we formally in month 7, 8, like in that we last month we reached 1.2 million people on Instagram alone, and my approach was to build platform by platform. So we did Instagram. We did Instagram, we did TikTok. TikTok we're having a bit of problems with, and again, for me, Debrief Network is actually my R&D, like for the pioneering of what the future of journalism is. So we kind of doing it. So literally, I'm like taking notes every time we do a story, and then like it doesn't reach people. Why is it not reaching people? What are the failures? What does sound have to do with it? So we're basically 7 to 8 in our team, and we have a presenter in Cape Town, Jomo, and we have essentially trying to build a network. I know we just introduced you this week. You'll see a new face on Debrief Network. Her name is Caitlin Paddy. She is a Wits student and she's going to be doing our world focus, right? So essentially what I'm doing is that young, energetic people, and my rule is you're doing real journalism, so you are not repurposing other people's content. So even if you are telling me about the gold price, I don't want to believe you unless you have spoken to an expert. Like, you have to bring me experts. It's real journalism. We are not doing repurposing and summaries and stealing other people's content and saying the news in 60 seconds when I literally took News 24's work and I told you on my platform. I'm not doing that. And then, okay, what has been the challenges? One is, how do I pay for this? How do I pay journalists to do it? Secondly is, why did I not just make it me, the extension of Qaanitah Hunter's journalism? Because I am not creating my ideas. Adamant, I did not want to become a news creator. I wanted to start a newsroom of the future. So that's like my big thing, which is why it was really stupid at the time to hire people when I could have just done this stuff myself and spent hours and hours teaching people instead of just again doing content. But again, the reality of it is that I am here to solve a problem. I am not here. I don't want to be doing journalism. I want to be writing fiction and that's what I want to be doing. So, and then I had to obviously work as a journalist freelance to pay salaries. Then I was adamant on one thing, and maybe I was silly to do this, but I believe that if you start scrappy, you stay scrappy. So I had to invest in Google Work Suites, invest in premium accounts for CapCut, invest in journalists, invest in paying Ubers for journalists to actually go to London to tell me about, when I know that story is only going to get 3,000 views, but it's okay because we are building something here, right? So what I realized by interacting with people who create new startups, etc., is that you're not doing the messy work of institutionalizing what you're doing. So everybody's like, no, you don't need an office, you don't need everything virtual, everything. But the problem with that is that you are not creating systems. And as long as you're not creating systems, as fast as you came to a scene, you can leave the scene. That's why, for me, is that if you are creating a new form of journalism, one, you need to like learn from the things that work in traditional. What worked in news? What works in News 24? Is that there's a definitive brand, that there's a definitive standard. That, for example, what I was explaining to the people at Arena yesterday is that why does the Sunday Times print every week? It's because there's an ecosystem. Somebody sat and created an architecture of what the newspaper must be, and editors follow that architecture. So if I know I'm a politics editor, I need to have 4 stories this week, I need to have a front page contender, etc., etc. Similarly, you have to create that framework. That's why when I compare my output, we deliver as much as Spotlight, as much as many of our better resourced competitors. And I'm unapologetic about it. There's no world. I'm like, we have to do 2 pieces of original journalism a day. And some days Hasina looks at me and says, there's nobody. Like, you are sitting at Newsroom Africa, you made me sit in interviews the whole day, and I have no other person. And I'm like, I don't care. We have to do, if we are committing the regularity of it, because you will not learn if you don't do. So for me, it's like, I didn't have cameras. I had shitty phones. And then now I was able to then scrap up and buy 4 DJI cameras. And when I look at what our competitors have, some of the bigger newsrooms has one single phone for an entire newsroom to create social content. And I say, okay, we are ahead in that regard, that now I'm actually spending time focusing on mics and cameras, which I wouldn't like 6 months ago, that was unthinkable. And now I'm in a place where I'm like, okay, like I'm talking to you from an art cafe because I don't have space and I can't pay for space at the moment, right? But this idea that there's things that work. A newsroom exists because of ideas. So how am I replicating that? It doesn't have to look like the old school dingy newsroom of the past, but there's take the positives of what work and integrate it into a new world. What if I need a new space twice a week? Maybe I don't need one every day, but I need a physical space twice a week. Okay, maybe I don't need to give journalists Dells every day, like everyone I can't afford to give them a laptop. But what if I give them these DJIs because it costs me 16,000 Rand, but I know the footage is going to be amazing and they can edit on any crappy phone because actually I can't afford to buy a journalist an iPhone. Or I can say, actually, my head of content, I can afford to buy her an iPhone because now I have gotten enough money, etc., etc. So essentially, the debrief network exists simply as a training, research and development tool. And I promise you, I have not solved the question of how is it going to be sustainable, because I know that you need mass audiences to solve mass audiences. But I'm like, okay, if I need to, take on Peter to pay Paul to develop an audience so that there's a blueprint on how to develop it and how to monetize, then let me be the person. But if we don't try, then we're just going to say, well, simply there was no business model, so okay, fine, I'm not gonna even try. So I'm hoping it's the 9th of October, Kate. In
Yes.
1 year's time, there's gonna be a business model, and I'm gonna be profitable. I'm gonna come back here to talk about it because that's what I'm focusing on. But my advice to you is to say, how can I firstly teach my audience to value my journalists and give it to them in a way that they want to? Secondly, if I already have clients, how can I walk with them the journey to this digital platform to say, if you were going to put a broadsheet advert in my newspaper, why not just sponsor a series with a journalist? The problem, though, and this is where brands are not biting, is because we haven't figured out content that works first. Nobody's going to gamble with their money. So build and they shall come. And I'm confident about it. I'm confident about it in terms of audiences. I mean, 1 million people watched our videos on Instagram alone. That is mad. And so I'm saying, for the most crappy, think about it. I have to work at least 2 or 3 full-time jobs. I write for News 24. I write for Newsroom Africa. I'm consulting to just get by, to pay people, to buy things, to, like I was saying in the Senate meeting, to get that 5,000 Rand to pay for membership to the press code was the most, I still haven't done the transfer, but I'm saying, do you know how hard that was to get that 5,000 Rand? But it is important to do for me because I'm saying we are doing real journalism. And if you value what you're doing, then you have to put your money where your mouth is and say, okay, it's real journalism on social media. I have to be a member of the press code. I have to find that 5,000 Rand.
Thanks, Qaanitah. That's just amazing. And I just love what you're saying about like that professionalism. Like, I will pay my press council fees. That's fabulous because I think that that's one of the critical things. That's what distinguishes you from, an influencer out there that doesn't care about those kind of ethics. Colleagues, what I'd like to do, if there's one burning question, I'll take it. If not, I'm going to, I can't see a burning question. I am going to thank Qaanitah very, very much for being really inspirational. We would love to have you back. As soon as you've got more things to tell us. I think you already gave us an absolute horde of things. But yeah, loads of questions. And we've got a recording of this and we'll send the recording to everybody. Thank you so much for participating. Thanks for all the questions. And thank you, Qaanitah. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Qaanitah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.